Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. So glad you joined us on Life Support. And what we do on this show is we tell stories to help you find a deeper relationship with Jesus through suffering and trauma. And I'm so glad to welcome one of our own here today from Ridgewood Church. I have Kevin and Kelly Christian. Kevin is our student ministries pastor. Kelly is his lovely wife that does most of the work. And I'm glad you're both here. Thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Great to be here.
So the reason you're here is you have a story that's not an easy story, but it is a God-centered story. And Kelly, I don't know if you want to just begin by kind of explaining where you're at right now, and then maybe we can backtrack 20 years ago when kind of this all started and what Jesus has meant to you through that time. So maybe just give us a brief update of how you're doing right now.
Okay. So I am currently doing chemotherapy treatments for Hodgkin's lymphoma. The diagnosis was made the end of March. It was, tomorrow will be my fourth treatment, and we have about 12 of them scheduled. So diagnosis was a long time coming. I've started with symptoms last May, and I started getting sick episodes, which we've come to call them. Basically, every 3 weeks, I would spike a really high fever for days. I would get swollen lymph nodes, ears would hurt, body would ache, night sweats. And these would last about 5 or 6 days. And then 3 weeks to the day, it would all begin again. And the episodes, as we got later into 2020, would get longer, 8 or 9 days. And then I would come out of it and I would feel halfway decent. And then 3 weeks to the date of the first symptoms, it would all start again. So what they had found was the EBV virus that normally, say you've ever had mono, that just would stay in a normal person's system and wouldn't come back up. But for me, having an autoimmune condition, lupus, it ended up that for some reason, if you have an autoimmune condition, it can sometimes rear its ugly head and start causing these issues that I was having, and ultimately can cause lymphoma. And so that's what the diagnosis was. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that very much. And I know that you guys have been walking this journey for a long time. So Kevin, why don't you kind of take us back to when kind of Kelly's health issues began and what was the genesis of all of that?
Yeah, we were, I remember we were dating. We just had begun dating, and I think it was our second date. We were talking, and Kelly sat down with me, and she said, "Hey, I got something I want to tell you. I have a disease called lupus." And I remember at the time thinking, and I told her this, that, okay, well, go ahead and get a shot, get that taken care of, and we'll go on and live our lives. I didn't even know how to spell the word at the time, right? And so I had really no clue what that meant for her, for our lives. Most of the time that we were dating, she never had any kind of a real bad flare-up or anything like that with lupus. But it was about 6 months into our marriage that I was carrying her to the bathroom, and because she had a pretty severe flare-up, that I started to realize, okay, this is lupus. This is what we're going to be dealing with. So early on, I didn't get it, but after the flare-ups began to happen, I started to really realize what this was going to possibly look like in our lives. Even back then, I don't think that I fully grasped what the journey was going to be like. In fact, I know I didn't. Just because I hadn't really ever dealt with it before. So early on, it became something that was going to be very real in our marriage.
I think if we knew what was coming, none of us would probably do anything.
That's right.
So not only then were you dealing with this, but you were also entering into ministry at that point. And what were you doing at that point in ministry?
I had gotten my first ministry position and was just getting used to what that life was going to look like. So to balance ministry and investing in students' lives, at first was, again, something that we didn't realize what that was going to look like as the future unfolded, just because Kelly had really felt the call at that time, too, to be a part of what I was doing, to be in youth ministry and student ministries. So there would be times that we would plan events that she was going to be kind of an integral part of, and then all of a sudden a flare-up would happen, and we would be kind of left with, okay, what do we do next? So what eventually began to happen is that Kelly would do a lot of the behind-the-scenes things that those things, if they didn't get done, we couldn't move forward with events or outings or anything in ministry.
Yeah, that's difficult. And Kelly, it went from kind of bad to worse, right? I mean, you got some more news after that, and went through some really difficult stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like first it was the lupus, and a lot of times if you have one autoimmune disease, you have several. You eventually will get several. So a few years after that, it was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Then it was Raynaud's, which affects the circulation in your fingers and your toes. And so, yeah, we just kind of, as the years went on, they just kind of kept adding things to the list, and we just, managed as best we could.
I think the first real powerful evidence of what this was going to look like for our lives is when we decided we wanted to have a child. And just got a lot of people praying, and really felt God just speak to our hearts saying, if you raise this child to know me, I'll bless you. Because the doctors were telling us this is probably not a good idea, just because of the medication that she was on and the toll that this could possibly take on her body. So we just really felt God's confirmation that He's gonna bless the situation. Kelly got off quite a bit, or almost all of her medication, to be able to have a child.
And also the miscarriage rate is very high for someone with lupus, so we didn't know what to expect, what this journey would look like. And one of the ways we could just see God's hand over it was, yes, getting off the meds. And then also I had went to go see an OBGYN that, and Kevin and I set up an appointment just as a consult, this was my doctor already, but I didn't really know what his background was, and so to speak. And we went and we talked to him, and I said, well, you know my situation, I have lupus, the prognosis of 4 patients who try to conceive. And I said, do you have any experience with patients with lupus? And he said, actually, I was out at Stanford and I did my residency, and I worked under one of the top lupus OBGYN doctors that there was. And so that was just a huge relief to us to know that this man had experience, and just felt like God had just lined that up perfectly.
Yeah, no randomness there at all.
Right.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, Kelly, what was it like for you as a believer getting these diagnoses? How did you grapple through that with God?
Well, honestly, I had not accepted Christ when I was diagnosed at 19. So I lived the first 5-6 years of my diagnosis. I was raised with a faith, and was raised Catholic, and always knew about God, and would feel close to Him at throughout different phases in my life, but never had really asked Him to be Lord of my life. So even during that time of diagnosis in the early years, I did feel a peace just knowing that He had me, and just trusting that He had the situation. But that just continued to just deepen once my relationship with Him had deepened. And I just have pretty much always looked at it like, yeah, this isn't what if I could write my story, this would not be part of it. However, there's got to be something here. He's taking me through this for a reason. And so does that mean that we don't have our discouraging days? Not at all, we do. But overall, I just look at it like there's a reason for this. And I don't want to miss what he's trying to teach me, what he's trying to teach Kevin, our family, as a couple. So.
A lot of people would hear that and they would say, well, that sounds good for you, but I really haven't gotten there, and my wife's ill, or I'm ill, or something's going on in my life. To what do you attribute being able to adopt that mindset? How did you get there?
Gosh, how did I get there?
Well, I think for me, and I think this will kind of answer that question for Kelly too, it was all about experiencing God through those early trials. With the pregnancy, the pregnancy went really, really well. It was bed rest, I think, for the last month or so. But Kelly felt really healthy during that time. And then it was about a year later, our daughter was around 1 year old, when the lupus just kind of came raging back. And I'll just kind of let Kelly tell you that part of it, and then why times like that got us through, seeing God's hand, got us through those really, really tough times.
Yeah, so when I was pregnant, I actually did feel really well. The hormones were great for my body, and I was like, I want to be pregnant forever. This is excellent. And then,
the first woman that has ever said that.
And then about 9 months afterwards, actually, I want to back up a little bit. I don't think it was even that long. I remember within a few weeks, actually, I was home, during the day alone with Kira, and I had such bad wrist pain that I had wrist braces on. I could barely get her out of her crib on my own. And I remember thinking, wow, is this my life as a new mom, almost not able to care for my child? And then as the months went on, the lupus just ravaged my body. We would just get one thing under control, because it can attack all organs in your body. And so we would just get one area under control, and then another one would flare up. I remember almost 9 months into it, I woke up one morning and I was stuck to my pillowcase because I had had a lupus rash on my face. And I went to bed the night before, and when I went to bed the night before, they were just like scabby on my face, and woke up and they were just oozing, and I was stuck to my pillowcase. And it just, one thing after another within those first few years, and then it attacked my kidneys, and we tried all these different medications and nothing seemed to work. So the last resort for lupus patients, sometimes chemotherapy can help restore your kidneys to fully function again, and that's what happened. The kidneys, after 10 months, my kidneys were working well, and eventually we got out of that rough period through the chemo, through a lot of things, and it settled down for a while. But that's the craziness of the disease, is that, you can have good weeks, good days, bad days. You just never quite know.
But that's a lot to deal with as a young couple, trying to make your way and then having your first child. And most people just have a hard time under perfect circumstances, let alone this.
Yeah.
So what did that teach you?
And that's kind of those times that I'm talking about. There were 3 times in the 25 years, not including this last year of what we've been dealing with, but 3 times in the 25 years that we were married that Kelly got so sick that we wondered if the next day was going to be there. And each time that we went through those valleys, God showed His grace, His mercy, His love for us. Even though, there were times that we wondered, God, are you here? During the actual trial. But to take her through that first major trial after our daughter was born, after Kira was born, and to see what the rash had did to her face and to her body. She wondered if her skin would ever be healed again, be back to what it used to be. As her husband, I wondered that same thing. And through medicine, through prayer, God did it. He completely healed her to where she didn't have any scarring at all on her face. So it was times like that we needed to go through to be able to see the goodness of God, and that's part of our journey. That's part of this whole process of dealing with things like that, because we see God's hand, and even though this last year has been a really, really difficult year, the worst physically, I think, of our whole marriage, it's been there's been a peace, the sense that God has our backs. Lupus, chronic illness, stuff like that, it really stole a lot from our marriage. When we entered our marriage, there was a sense of just kind of, okay, this is all new, and we both love to be active, and we golfed together, and we played tennis, and we rode bike, and within the first year or two, all of that came to an end. It stole intimacy a lot of times between Kelly and I, and it caused, as a husband, I felt a lot of times really helpless. I really wanted to make her feel better. I really wanted to help her to be able to get out of bed and begin to just enjoy life a little bit more. And that was difficult. That was difficult to deal with. That caused a lot of loneliness. There were times, a lot of times where the weekend would come and a lot of my friends, a lot of couples that we knew were out doing things. And we weren't. We would have to just sit around and kind of be in the house just because of that. Kelly wasn't able to be in the sun because that's a thing with lupus. So it caused a lot of loneliness. So chronic illness, lupus, things like that definitely tend to steal from marriages. And that, again, that was part and continues to be part of our journey together, dealing with those things, seeing God's goodness during those times of our lives. So it's definitely, we are another one of those couples that haven't arrived. We don't sit on a throne right now going, oh, things are all fine now, even though there's trials. We just face it with complete faith, and it's better, much, much better. God has done so much in us, and much, much better than it used to be. But we are still journeying all of the things that we're dealing with.
Do you find that people in the church know what to do when they meet you and when they find out what you're dealing with, Kelly?
I think because a lot of times you don't see the effects or the symptoms. You can hide it pretty well. Obviously, during those big rash moments, you can't hide it real well. But I think it's more like a hidden disease. So I don't think that people really. I mean, I didn't understand it when I was diagnosed with it. I thought, well, can you give me a prescription and I'll be on my way? So when you hear the word lupus, you just don't really understand it. And so when you meet someone and you tell them that, I think, I think a lot of people try to understand, but I don't think they understand. They don't really probably understand because they're not there 24 hours a day. They don't see you behind closed doors. They don't see the cuts in your fingers because of bad circulation where you can, can't do certain things, your fine motor skills aren't working well, all the little things that you just deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I think people definitely try to understand, but it's difficult. If I didn't have it and I met someone who had it, you can read about it, you can try to put yourself in their place, but I don't think anyone fully gets it.
Is that in itself isolating?
Yes, I would say so. And I think also, you struggle with, maybe telling someone you're having a bad couple of days And then that person maybe talks to someone else who says, yeah, I heard Kelly was having a few bad days. Well, I just saw her and she looked great. She didn't mention anything to me. So then, you wonder, like, do people think that you're just embellishing your story or making things up about how difficult it really is? So I just think overall, chronic illness is hard for people to understand.
Yeah. What would you like someone to say to you if you run into somebody in the church lobby and you flash that big smile that you have, and what would you like people to say? What kind of questions do you want them to ask, or do you want them just to not ask?
That's very interesting, because sometimes, I've never wanted these diseases that I deal with to kind of be my identity. Do you know what I mean? Yep. So I don't want it to be there's Kelly, the lupus girl.
Yeah.
So
yep.
So I think, with closer friends who I've shared more details about it, asking me how I'm doing and how are you really doing, because my first thought is, when someone asks me that, is I'm good. I'm not going to get into, well, today this is hurting and that's hurting. So I think, with my closer friends, just having them be real with me, how are you really doing today? But obviously I don't think I would want everybody coming up to me and just, hi, are you okay today? Can I hug you? Will that hurt?
Yeah, right.
Well,
that can be exhausting.
Yeah, exactly.
And it can feel awkward if you think that people are tiptoeing around you.
Right.
But yet you don't really need platitudes either, because you sort of know what you're dealing with, and you've been on this journey for a long time.
Yeah.
Which is why I think in churches we need to continue to learn how to talk about these things,
right,
and how to learn to help each other go through these kinds of trials. Because I think there's a sense in the Christian community that if I throw out the right Bible verse, they'll take that and they'll go back and get better and everything will be okay. Right. Not always the way it works.
Right.
I really appreciate you two being here this week. I'll add some more questions I want to get to next time. But you're both very courageous, you're filled with faith, and you're a tremendous encouragement. So thanks for sharing your story.